Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Jeanne Klein. I'm the coordinator of the Master Gardeners Public Speakers Bureau. And today we have Lori Trojan, who is from last year's class, which is fabulous. She persevered, so you understand how persistent she is. She's a great lady here. And she is going to present the Healing Herb Garden, Growing Herbs for Optimal Health. And she has quite a bit of experience with this and has taken some classes as well. Didn't you tell me you took some classes on this, Lori?
Oh, more than classes. Yes, it was actually part of my college degree, believe it or not. I really started with an interest as a child. So this has been many years in the making for me.
Okay, well, fabulous. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And but before we do, I'm just want to let everybody know that if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And at 1:45 is when we will start asking. I'll moderate the questions, and Lori will answer the questions at that time. Okay. So without further ado, take it away, Lori.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending the presentation today. I'm delighted that you're joining me. I am a master gardener now, which I am thrilled about. I was in the graduating class of 2020, as Sean mentioned. I'd always wanted to be a master gardener, probably for about, I don't know, maybe 30 years now, but never had the opportunity to actually go through the coursework, always too busy working. So I'm very pleased that has happened. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself so you're familiar with me before we continue on. From the time I was about 8 years old, I spent summers with my grandparents who lived in a small town in western Missouri. And it was just the most enchanting place. It was full of fruit brambles and wild herbs and produce. And my grandmother was quite amazing. And she taught me from an early age about the value of herbs and about all the properties and things that they could do. Um, and of course, they never used any chemicals on their garden. It was long before those times. And they really relied on companion planting, regular weeding, rotating plant varieties. Those are just a few of the methods they used to keep and maintain a healthy garden. My grandmother and her mother before hers and hers before her, which is as far back as I know, were actually the healers in their European village. And that was commonplace for a village to have a healer. It was really before medical doctors were around. And of course, pharmaceutical companies, as we know them now, were not present. And my grandmother came to this country, came to America. She was one of 8 children that came over together when she was 16. And her family brought with them very unique medicinal herbal seeds. And so my grandmother had some wonderful things in her garden that I learned from. And today I am the steward of Wild Ivy Herb Farm. It is a small 3-acre labor of love located between Lawrence and Baldwin in Douglas County. And there I am growing kitchen herbs, medicinal herbs. We're always a work in progress, but it's a lovely place to be. We run workshops throughout the summer as well for people who want to learn more about gardening and growing herbs. In a nutshell, I am a master herbalist, now a master gardener, author, educator, farmer, mother, grandmother. And perhaps one day I'll see some of you at the farm, which would be joyful. So let's just dive in now that you know a little bit about me and my background. Um, the name of our presentation today is The Healing Herb Garden, Growing Herbs for Optimal Health. And we'll take some time to get to know individual herbs as well as learning about the care and maintenance of the herb garden. So most people are very surprised to learn about the properties of just common herbs. So for example, rosemary, a common kitchen herb. You can use rosemary to flavor a chicken, soups, stews, as we all know. But you can also use rosemary to make a hair rinse and add shine to your hair. You can make a paste of it and it will deter rodents. So rosemary does lots of things that people don't even realize. And that is part of the fun of studying herbs, is learning all the things you can do with something so very common. It's a fascinating study, learning about the potential of the humble herb, and how they can enhance our lives. This photo is of my previous garden when I lived down in the Ozarks. It was quite a wild, beautiful place. But I included this photo so that everyone would know that space is never an obstacle. Whether you have acreage, like myself, 3 small acres, whether you have a half an acre, whether you have 30 acres, it does not matter. Whether you have raised beds or containers, herbs can be grown, and they are easy to grow, and they don't need many uh, special soils, special attendants. They are easy to grow, they are hardy, they will grow almost anywhere. Rocky soil, beautiful soil. In fact, the less beautiful the soil, the happier they are. And so in this picture, you can actually see echinacea, elecampane, passion flower climbing up the trellis. There is lavender, cucumber, okra, burdock, zucchini, marigolds, and nasturtiums, all growing in the same bed. It's quite a large bed, but I had many, many raised beds. This was but one on a hillside. And I grow herbs and produce interspersed with one another as part of companion planting, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. So when you're getting ready to start a herb garden, the very first thing you'll want to do is to identify and prepare a site in which to plant. And that's very simple. You need an area that needs about 4 hours of full sun a day. On my farm, we get a really good 4 hours of morning sun, and then portions of the acreage get shade as well. But as long as you have 4 strong hours, you're good. Neutral to alkaline soil, somewhere between 6 and 6.5 on the pH scale, is just about perfect. And good drainage is also extremely important for herbs. They don't like to have their feet wet, and they don't like to sit in water. So good drainage is important. And if you have questions about areas that you might have that are soggy or get too much water, but it's the only area you have to plant herbs, I can make some recommendations for you to improve your drainage if that's a concern. And avoid hostile takeovers. That's really important because most herbs, generally speaking, tend to spread like crazy. If they're happy, they will try to take over the rest of the garden. They are like weeds, and in many cases, weeds are considered to be herbs, herbs as weeds. And so something like, for example, cleavers, which people try to get out of their lawn, I try to plant it in the lawn. So it all depends on what you're seeing and what your viewpoint and your knowledge is of that herb and what it can do for you. But if you do not want it to spread, like the mint varieties, tansy, lemon balm from the mint family, and woodruff is another good example. Plant the herb in a bucket and bury the bucket, and bury the rim right up to the top of the soil. You won't even be able to tell that herb is in a bucket, but it will keep it from spreading. It's very important that you keep your herb garden weed-free. And when I say weed-free, that means not the herb itself, but weeds that you don't want to be in the garden. So I have a space where I grow dandelion, but I don't want dandelions in the rest of my garden. That it's not appropriate, and the roots will disturb, for example, an oregano plant. So I take dandelions out where they don't belong, and they are where they do belong, if that makes sense. So you want weeds that you do not want in your garden out. And just know this too, sometimes when you're growing herbs and you don't recognize it as it's coming up as a young little sprout, Don't just automatically pull these things out thinking that they're weeds. That could be your herb that you're growing from seed. So give it a chance to really come up and make sure you know what you're looking at before you yank it out. But so containing weeds is important. And although I have a farm, I am out there every day pulling weeds by hand. I don't want to disturb other plants. I think that works for me, but there are many options as far as weed control. And because weed pressure can be just really something to contend with. The closer you plant your herbs together, the more they will spread and they will choke out the weeds as well. If you are using container gardening, then you may be using raised beds. You may have pots on your deck or on your porch. Wonderful. This is a good container soil mix. If you'd like to mix your own soil, this soil is ideal for herbs. And you can buy this soil mix in bags. Look for these ingredients. I prefer organic. And so you can buy it ready-made. You don't have to make your own, but if you wish to, this is a good recipe. So 1 part peat moss or cocoa peat. Coir is very easy to find now. It used to be difficult, but now it's very common. Plus 1 part perlite or vermiculite, 1 part compost, whether you make your own or you purchase something like a mushroom compost, fabulous. And if you're growing woody varieties of herbs like lavender or rosemary that are bushy, add 1 part of coarse sand. They like that, and also helps with drainage. The care and maintenance of a herb garden is straightforward and simple. We already talked about weeding. Pest control is really not much of a problem. They do not attract pests like produce does. But I also grow elderberries, and elderberries are prone to certain insects. I find for myself that neem oil works very well. You might have some other methods that you'd like to share with me. I also like beneficial insects. Releasing ladybugs is good, but I will warn you against praying mantises. They eat hummingbirds, from what I understand, which is dreadful. So just be careful where you put them if you decide to use that particular insect, but insect control is great. I've even used like a couple of drops of Dawn soap and lots of water and mixed that, and that's really great for whitefly. And I'll give you some resources at the end of the presentation where you can find more information on pest control as well. Pruning is essential. Herbs remind me of our hair. The more you cut, the more they come. In England, we used to call them cut and come again. And so when you chop the tops, more will grow, and it will grow thicker. So I would say that even if you're growing a herb that you don't use often, so I use oregano, it's just an easy reference. Let's say you're growing that and you just haven't made a dish that requires oregano and now it's tall and leggy. Don't let it get to that point. Cut it down regularly, at least once a week. And even if you don't use that herb in cooking this week, set it out on some paper towels to dry. Stick those paper towels in a dark, dry place, like in a closet even. And then you have dried herb to use in the future as well. Deadheading is also important. Many herbs will flower, as in this picture. I almost always snip off, nip off the flowers off of a herb, because it will cause the energy to go into the plant, cause it to spread, make the roots stronger instead of putting all of its energy into making flowers. Unless you're using it, of course, in a landscape and you're looking for those flowers to decorate. Mulching also important. I overwinter by mulching all of my herbs, especially the woody herbs like lavender. A lot of times I just use dried leaves and gather them up around the base of that herb. Straw works very well. Lots of opportunities for mulching. And sometimes in the heat of summer, I will put straw because it keeps the moisture in. You just have to be careful that in early spring, move the straw away. It rains a lot. They don't like wet feet. So if they get soggy, you'll lose your herbs. And just know that if you're doing container gardening, to water often. Repot your containers when necessary. They do grow fast, these guys, and they will outgrow your containers. If you want it only to be a certain size, choose a container in which you're happy with the size that it will be, but just know that you can continue to put it in larger and larger pots and it will grow to the size of the pot. To check water levels, it's easiest just to stick your finger in the pot up to about your second knuckle. If your finger comes out, it's muddy, the soil sticks to your finger, you know you do not need to water it. If soil does not stick to your finger and you bring up a clean finger, then it's time for watering. When you're designing your herb garden, it's a good idea to plant herbs by category. Now, I will say too that this session is being recorded. So if you'd like to revisit this for any reason, this may be helpful to you. So planting herbs by category is fun. So you can have portions of your garden that are just kitchen herbs. And you can head for that when you need those kitchen herbs. And then a portion of the garden could possibly be medicinal herbs. These are just some examples of those, but there are endless varieties. But just to give you some idea of categories that you can use to design a herb garden. Other categories also might include fragrance. So you might want a fragrant garden. So just an area that is just a sensual experience. And here are some examples of herbs that have wonderful fragrance. In fact, right now I have catnip in mass that's coming up right next to my hoop house. And every time I open the door, it doesn't even touch the plant. Every time I just open the door and there's this just the slightest of breeze, you can smell the catnip and it's joyful. So a lot of these are extremely fragrant and just have the most wonderful experience. And some, like for example, creeping thyme, you can walk on it, you won't kill it. And as you walk, the fragrance just surrounds you. So that's a lovely thing. And then I have here categorized by color. So if you like to garden by color block, this may help you as well. And we'll move on. I have this disclaimer in here for what we're about to see. So all medicinal qualities listed are folkloric only. These herbs or formulations and preparations of each have not been evaluated by the FDA. They're not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So for the majority of the remainder of the presentation, I'd like to talk to you about herbs that you can plant in your garden. We'll talk about native herbs and we'll talk about just some ordinary kitchen herbs. But what I want to really focus on here is the properties of these herbs. And what I think you're going to find is that you may be surprised by some of these things that you already have in your garden, perhaps, and did not realize that they are considered to be medicinal herbs. So let me also say that I have a very short list for the presentation, but you can find an extensive list. If you go to this website here, kstate.nativeplants, and there is an exhaustive list of native herbs. The medicinal properties are not listed there, but there is a wonderful list of natives that is extremely useful. So we'll start with those herbs that require shade and part shade. Wild ginger, Ascarum caudatum, addresses the issues of stomach upset, cramps, and colic, particularly in babies. Bloodroot, Sanguinaria canadensis. If you don't grow bloodroot, it is just the most beautiful, fragile thing. It addresses issues such as cough, infection, also for the heart, cancer treatment. A beautiful little white flower, and it gets its name because the root, if you cut the root, it literally has a juice that is red and drops red like blood. It's really something. The greater celandine poppy, Stylophorum diffilum. It is a plant that addresses liver disease and digestion. Spiderwort, a beautiful native. The flower is gorgeous, often found in the Flint Hills in massive fields. Tradescanthia ernestiana actually addresses kidney issues, stomach issues, works as a laxative, and affects stings and bites. And that's good to know. You know, you're out just taking a hike and you need something because you've been stung, grab spiderwort. More shade, part shade. Black cohosh you don't see quite as often, but it is a wonderful healing herb that has the most magnificent flower, Cimicifuga racemosa. And most women know this as a herb that addresses menopausal symptoms. Solomon's seal spreads like wildfire, loves woodsy. Polygonatum biflorum addresses inflammation and water retention. Virginia bluebells, Mertensia virginica, addresses whooping cough and tuberculosis. You don't see it used quite as often medicinally because you don't see these issues as often, but it's a fun one to know because a lot of people have wild bluebells, and it's nice to know that they are medicinal and not just pretty. Wild sweet William. This is Phlox divaricata. And again, this is very common, and most people do not realize that wild sweet William actually is medicinal, addresses urinary tract and digestion, and the flowers are actually edible. Herbs that require full sun, and these again are natives. Columbine, Aquilegia canadensis, addresses issues of the gallbladder and intestinal disorders. And as you can imagine, those are interconnected. Marsh milkweed, particularly, Asclepias incarnata. It's a diuretic and addresses coughs and colds. Then we have butterfly milkweed, also an Asclepias, but interestingly does something a little bit different. This is Asclepias tuberosa, addresses swelling, diarrhea, and blindness, interestingly enough. The New England aster, a beautiful, beautiful flower. Aster novae anglia addresses pain, fever, and diarrhea. More full sun common natives. The prairie coreopsis, very, very common native. Coreopsis palmata addresses rheumatism. The purple coneflower, which most people are familiar with. Echinacea purpurea or Echinacea angustifolia. The angustifolia variety has higher levels of the medicinal quality, but purpurea is also extremely useful. Most of us know it as an immune stimulator. Joe pie weed, again, very common in this area, Eupatorium purpureum, addresses chronic renal and cystic issues, also gout. Now, the next two coming up are also very interesting. So we have bee balm, which is Monarda bradburyana. Bee balm, also a beautiful little flower, and it addresses digestion, inflammation, and is an antimicrobial. Next, we also have a monarda. This is wild bergamot. And interestingly, people tend to say, oh, bee balm is the same as bergamot. But in fact, wild bergamot is Monarda fistulosa. They can be used in the same manner, but as you can see, they address slightly different issues. So it's nice to have both varieties in the garden and fun to see how they are the same and how they are different. Wild bergamot addresses issues such as colds, kidney, headache, and vision. Foxglove, beard tongue, Penstemon digitalis, Now, digitalis, I'm sure you are familiar with that. It is actually, this particular native herb is a plant from which they have derived digitalis in the scientific world to address heart issues. As a wild medicinal, we use it to address chills, fever, sometimes toothache. But know this, there is a cautionary with many of these herbs. This is one of them. In small or large doses, this can be poisonous. You must be cautious. Garden phlox, Phlox paniculata. This addresses boils, stomach issues, and eczema. We all know phlox. And the Missouri black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia, which most people are familiar with, Rudbeckia missouriensis. And this black-eyed Susan actually works very much like echinacea to stimulate the immune. It's not quite as strong, but if you don't grow coneflower, I'm sure you could find black-eyed Susan wild, probably wherever you live, and you can treat it just like echinacea, and it will do, it has a similar function. More full sun native herbs. Showy goldenrod. This is Solidago speciosa. It actually addresses inflammation and spasms, and I make a tea and an infused oil of goldenrod every year, just by wild crafting. It's a great muscle rub when you've been out in the garden far too long. Yucca, Yucca filamentosa. Now, yucca will address arthritis, migraine, liver, and gallbladder. I will say that feverfew is probably a little bit more effective for migraine, but if you do not have feverfew, yucca. Sedum, Sedum ternatum, which will address high blood pressure and inflammation. And most people just know sedum as a ground cover and just an attractive plant that they use in the landscape. And most do not know that it is highly medicinal. Prairie dock also looks like a weed. How many times have you just pulled that out of the lawn and thinking, oh, I hate this stuff? Well, don't hate this stuff anymore. This is Silphium it's a long one. Terebinthinaceum, and it addresses coughs and congestion, and it is highly medicinal. So prairie dock is actually, yellow dock is actually something that I grow intentionally. This is just a scant list of natives that are shade and sun-loving perennials only. It does not include woody shrubs, ferns, vines, grasses, sedges. Most of those are not highly medicinal, but some are. But these are the ones that come to mind that are more native to our area. And now we come to common kitchen herbs, forgive me. And these
We have about 15 minutes left to talk about the culinaries.
Thank you, Jean. I appreciate that. You're keeping me on track. I'm grateful. These I listed because these are most popular. And again, people know that they can be used for culinary purposes, but forget that all of these have very highly medicinal properties. So basil addresses fatigue, depression, anxiety, urinary issues, and even prostatitis. Caraway addresses gas, indigestion, and sore throat. Chives lower blood pressure in bulk. You really have to ingest a high quantity of chives, but it will lower blood pressure, has been proven. Dill addresses gas and colic in children and also stimulates milk flow in nursing mothers. Marjoram, very much like oregano, addresses colds, flu, mouth sores, sore throat. I highly recommend oil of oregano in the winter to address colds. It's an antibacterial. Parsley is a diuretic, helps with gas and colic. Rosemary, we've already talked a little bit about. Sage, just Common garden sage is a mouth healer, sore throat, sore gums, tonsils, tonsillitis. When buying herbs, look for the specific Latin name. It's very important. There are many types, many species. For example, there are many types of clover, but only Trifolium praetens, which is the red clover, has strong medicinal qualities, including as a diuretic and an anti-cancer. So when you are purchasing herbal plants specifically for medicinal properties, always buy by the Latin name so you know what you're getting. We're about to talk about some cautionaries, and it's brief, but this is also very important to know. Before you ingest any herb, you want to know what its specific properties are. Something like digitalis, for example, that is poisonous. Lily of the valley, while it is beautiful, it has wonderful medicinal qualities, also poisonous in high quantity. And know that if you're growing it for beauty, if you have children, dogs, cats that might be ingesting those plants, really know what you're planting before you do that, because it could be toxic. Also, it is advised to use one herb at a time and avoid compounds in the beginning. A compound is anything made of 2 herbs or more. And I recommend that because if you should have an adverse reaction to any herb, if you're using a compound, you won't know which herb is causing the issue for you. So start with one herb at a time and you'll be able to identify the culprit that's causing the issue for you. And then you can add in others to make a compound if you wish to. Don't expect any herb to be a cure-all. What works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. Everyone has allies that they prefer, that they have found to be relevant to their issues or that agree with them better. Herbs, each herb does many things. So for example, one that we've already used, echinacea may work for me to stimulate immune. Black-eyed Susan may work for you better if echinacea causes an allergic reaction. So these are things to know. Don't expect that one herb will be the cure for everyone. Also, we've talked about checking any cautionary information about all herbs before you use them. Be safe. Do your research. Learn about each plant before you use it, particularly before ingesting it. And finally, here are some references which I'd like to briefly mention. So there's a wonderful YouTube video by Dr. Kelly Kincher. I'm sure a lot of you have his books. I do too. They are wonderful. The YouTube video is The Native Medicinal Plants of the Prairie. It's awesome. I have already mentioned the website for K-State listing native plants. The next one is just nothing but pure fun and joy. It is botanical.com, and it is a modern herbal by Mrs. M. Grieve, and it is full of folkloric, wonderful stories about so many herbs imaginable and just so fun. Another fun one is Jerry Baker's Giant Book of Garden Solutions. If you've never seen it, you need to get it. It is hysterical. It's full of cartoon drawings and fun recipes that are all organic to use in your garden. It will make you laugh. And I use those solutions. They are fantastic and clever. And then, of course, we have something that's the old standby, of course, the Rodale's Illustrated Encyclopedia of Herbs. I'm sure most of that have us on the shelf. And finally, my book that has just been published. In fact, it just came out this last week. It's called A Guide to Growing Herbs. And and here I've got a copy right here. This is what it looks like. Pretty little book. And it can be found on my website, which is wildivyherbfarm.com. Basically lists 50 of the most popular common herbs, all their properties, how to use them, what parts to use, how to identify them, and also instruction on gardening, designing a herb garden, anything that you could possibly imagine about herbs, how to maintain them, where to plant them, and how to make everything from tinctures, salves, teas, infused oils, infused vinegars, you name it, you'll be able to make it because the recipes are in this book. So that wraps that up. I hope I've left plenty of time for questions if there are any.
Thank you so very much, Lori. Yes, we actually have 25 minutes for question and answers if we like.
I spoke fast.
And yeah, no, this is very, very clear and clean and wonderful advice, and congratulations on your book. This is really fabulous. I think so. Our first question comes from Sandra, and she wants to know what part of the columbine is used for medicinal purposes.
Well, I thought some people might ask these questions. So, columbine, you can use the seed, the leaf, the root, not the flower. But columbine has a cautionary. In large doses, it can make you very ill. Tiny doses to see what your capacity is to absorb it and how you feel. And most commonly, columbine is used as a tea.
Okay, great. And what are your favorite places to get herb? I should say herb, since it's British, correct British pronunciation.
Both
What are your
are
favorite
correct.
places to get the herb plants or seeds?
You know, I'll tell you, so many of these plants are difficult to find in your local nursery, although obviously, you know, it is becoming more common. There is more interest every year in medicinal herbs, which I am thrilled to see. But there are some seed companies that are particularly good about carrying lots of varieties. Seed Savers is a good one. Seed Savers Exchange. I love them. I like what they're doing and their purpose. But my go-to is, oh my goodness, it's Rico Sech in Oregon. And oh dear, the name has just escaped me. It'll come to me before we're done, I'm sure. But he only carries seeds, roots, rhizomes, and actually some plants of medicinal herbs. That's his gig. And he actually has been an advisor to the FDA. And his catalog is just astonishing and all organic. So I get most of my plants from that seed guide. And oh goodness.
I think Sandra says it's called Strictly Medicinal. Rico?
That's it. Thanks, Sandra. Just jump in and help when I need it. That's it. StrictlyMedicinal.com. You are awesome. Yes, that's it.
Okay. All right. I know, well, as I mentioned to you, Lori, my sister is an herbalist in Bozeman, Montana, and has written some chapters with Kelly Kincher, as a matter of fact. But, you know, one of the questions I always have, and I don't expect you to go through every herb to tell us about this, but, you know, it would be nice to have a chart. Does your book include like a chart of if you use the leaves, you use the seeds, you use the roots, you use the, you know, because you talk about the plant as a whole, but I'm wondering which part of the plant to use for things.
It's an excellent question. So I'm going to hold this up in case you can see it. I'm not sure whether you can. This is the section of the book that lists each herb and actually lists the type. So is it a biennial, a perennial, an annual? What its height is, what it can grow to width-wise, what color the flower is, how to identify the foliage and what color the foliage is, the parts to harvest and when to harvest it. So there is that, and it's extensive. And then there is another section of the book as well. I'll hold this up. Like I say, I'm not sure if you guys can see this very well, but this section of the book lists the herbs in a different format. Are you getting that, guys?
All we can see is the listing, the chart.
Well, this
can't read anything.
of the book, will list each herb separately and will tell you culinary and medicinal properties. So how you can use it in the kitchen, what its medicinal properties are. And when I say medicinal properties, I'm talking about things like Is it a tonic? Is it a laxative? Is it a digestive bitter? Is it a menagogue? Is it a vulnerary? So, and then of course, there's a listing of the definition of those words in the book as well. But and then how to prepare it. Should you make a tincture, a decoction, a salve, an ointment, a poultice? So that's in there as well. So not only identifying the plants, but how to really effectively use them. And then, so, you know, as it says these things, then you read, oh, well, you use it as a tincture. Well, what the heck is that? And how do I make that? So that is another section of the book, is how to do that. Step-by-step recipes, how to make a tincture, how to make a salve. Mm-hmm.
So in general, do most herbs require, again, some sort of a that you have to mix them into a tincture or a poultice, or, you know, I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is which herbs can you just use the leaf right off the plant?
Yes, and some you can, some you can. So cleavers, I mentioned already too, is, you know, a wonderful herb that just, you know, is a weed in the garden, as most people think of it, and actually use weed killer to get rid of it, which just, you know, it blows my mind. But cleavers is awesome, and you can literally just pick it right out of the lawn and eat it. And cleavers is a lymph mover. So, you know, folklorically, many cancer patients have used it to move lymph. Highly effective. And you can make a tonic out of cleavers. So things like that you can just eat. And of course, there are beautiful flowers that, you know, are edible that you can throw into a salad. So there are many that you can just pick and eat. And some, of course, that must be prepared in order to use them effectively.
Right. I am really surprised that when people, and thank you for cautioning us about the folkloric aspects of things, because I know that's really crucial. But, you know, when you use the word, you know, it can help with cancer treatment, that seems really shocking to me, that
That's
I
strong
can't
stuff.
possibly imagine
Yeah,
that it would actually help in any way, maybe with chemo symptoms. Can you clarify exactly like which kinds of herbs can help with the treatments, perhaps?
There are herbs that have been known to help cancer patients.
Huh.
Some radically, some in combination with scientific medicines, some without. I would recommend doing your research. There are some that are listed in the book. Every situation is different depending on where the issue lies. To give an overview would be an error on my part.
Yeah.
It is very specific. The usages are specific. But I would be happy to talk to anyone about things that have been used folklorically. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I know my sister's does the same thing, you know, that it's not, herbs are not going to cure cancer. And you have to be very, very cautious. And like you say, they're not necessarily, there's some, you know, cancer, the big C word is such a massive, there's so many kinds that attack so many different parts of the body that you just can't be global about it, you know, in terms of herbs.
And you can't be flippant about it, you know, to
Right.
show this cures cancer is ridiculous.
Right.
But there are many in-depth research projects going on now, looking at herbs for these very purposes. So I am hopeful that before, you know, the end of my life, that perhaps we are utilizing herbs for some of these, you know, really tragic diseases.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to ask, I guess, another question in regard to important issues. I know that Kelly Kincher and others have looked into echinacea quite a bit.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that the medicinal part of echinacea is its roots, which
Yeah.
basically means you have to dig up the plant and kill it to use the roots. And so there's a whole industry out there that has to do with poaching. And I'm wondering if you know of any poaching that's going on locally in Northeast, in our county or in Northeast Kansas, or maybe other parts of Kansas, if you're aware of that problem.
Well, let me also say you're absolutely right about echinacea, and know too that an echinacea plant, in order to use the roots, must be at least 2 years old and older.
Mhm.
Baby plants don't have enough of the medicinal quality that is gathered in the root to make it useful. So you have to have mature uh, echinacea plants, and it is gut-wrenching to yank them up. I know that. Believe me, and I grow it in mass quantity just because of that. But no, too, you can also dig up echinacea and dig a piece of the root and leave a small part to continue to thrive throughout the coming years. But it takes a minute for it to come back. It's a slower grower. So yes, that is absolutely true. And but as far as the latter half of your question, there are people in this area who are instructing and educating. I am one of them. I run workshops all summer on the farm. So you can come to the farm, see the plants, and learn so many aspects of how to use them. And that's at Wild Ivy Herb Farm. But we also have many other wonderful people in the area who are teaching. And there's a mother-daughter group couple that teaches in the area. Tamara and Twyla, I believe their names are. Ocoee Miller is very well known in Lawrence. There are many other sources, and if anyone watching this is interested in more sources, if you want to reach out to me, I will be happy to help you source someone that will address the information that you might be seeking, because each of us have our own methods. And not to say that the workshops I run may be right for you. Maybe someone else is an educator that is more directly in line with what you're looking for. So depending on what you're looking for is who should be recommended to you.
Okay, and Sandra's reminding us that Tamara and Twyla are at Good Earth gatherings.
Good Earth gatherings, and their place is not far from mine. So thank you everyone for jumping in on this, because it's very helpful.
Yeah. Is there anyone who would like to unmute and ask some other questions or perhaps comments for Lori? Brian thanks you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep, because we still have about 10 minutes.
I was going to thank you too, Lori. Thank you.
Hi, Diane. Thank you. Thank you for attending. I would also encourage everyone, while we're on the topic of herbs, to, if you are in Lawrence or have the opportunity to be in Lawrence, the Master Gardeners have established a medicinal garden that can be visited. And it is a beautiful, peaceful place. And you can view many different native medicinal herbs at that garden. And so I would highly recommend that if you have an opportunity, to pass through and see that.
And they're having a social, I understand, too, coming up.
Yes,
I think it's on,
and I will be part of that. That's happening tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
right.
at the Medicinal Garden. I'll be there. The books will be there. We're going to have herbal teas and some lovely snacks and talk about the garden, tour the garden. Everyone is welcome.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. There's so many properties Lord, so many herbs and and medicinal herbs. And then there's so many different properties of all of them. I mean, it's for me personally, it's just hard to keep them all straight in my head, about which, like if there's groupings of what they use, are useful for. But I'm wondering if, again, kind of going off the echinacea question again, are there other herbs that you have to destroy the plant in order to use the roots, which is the core of the medicinal, has the medicinal quality?
There are many plants that require the root.
Okay.
Burdock is another very popular plant that you must use the root. And the root of the burdock plant can be used medicinally, but it's also in the Far East, it is called gobo. And you can prepare it and eat it, and it's a delicacy and delicious. But it isn't always necessary to destroy a plant by harvesting the root. You can harvest a part of the root, depending on how much you need. And chances are, if you have many echinacea plants, like in an area of your garden or in a pot, you can maybe harvest one root for yourself or a couple of roots to make tea for the family. You don't necessarily have to take the entire root and kill the plant, but you can even uproot the entire plant, take a piece of the root and replant it with just a small piece remaining, and it will continue on for you.
Okay.
Things are hardy. Boy, I tell you what, you got to be really cruel to kill them.
Well, and I'm just, my heart goes out to killing plants, so that's why I wonder about that. And especially if you're in a business of, growing lots of herbs for medicinal purposes, then you want to have enough to make enough tincture, to make enough teas, to make enough, poultice, to make enough. So that's why I'm just curious. I mean, do you also sell your tinctures and poultices or teas or what have you? I mean, is that something, or lavender packets for your dryer? I mean, it's just, there's so many.
Idea. Thank you, Sean. I might just.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, I mean, because I'm seeing this huge garden with all these wonderful herbs all over it. I'm just imagining, what a wealth of joy you have there. It's great.
You must come and visit.
Yeah.
It is joyful and exactly. And yes, I do make products, and it is a wonderful place to be. It's just fun. And I have right now this year, I just planted 60 elderberry bushes. And
oh my.
You talk about not wanting to kill plants, and it's just me on the farm. I'm the only, the dog, but the dog is not always terribly helpful.
Right, yeah.
But she is fun. So I planted these 60 elderberry bushes, and as many of you know who are local, we have just had frost warning after frost warning. And I just took a photo. It would make you laugh. I literally took Walmart plastic bags and covered every one of those 60 bushes because I was so afraid that the frost would harm them. And that, when you're growing any kind of plant, they become, like your little baby. And
they are, exactly. I did the same thing with my husband. I'm freaking out,
In fact, the caption to the photo was, "Thank you, Walmart, for helping to be sustainable on my farm."
The elderberries. Are you planning on making wine?
No, I am not. Although I love elderberry wine, but I'm not planning on making that. My gig will be elderberry syrup.
Oh my.
That is the goal. But that won't be ready for 2 to 3 years, probably. The bushes need to grow, become mature. There's lots to do with them before they're ready for that, before they're ready for harvesting berries, but I'm hopeful for the future.
So let me also ask you, let's see, someone else gave a thanks too before they left. I want to see who that was.
Thank you.
We have lots of thank yous here. Mara wanted to thank you as well. I went and forgot my question. Which herbs do you use most often for medicinal purposes? Like if you had to pick 5, what are the 5 herbs that you use most often for medicinal purposes?
Top 5. Echinacea would be number 1. I've used it for years. comfrey I grow in abundance. And comfrey for me is an integral ingredient in a salve that I make. Not to digress, I can give you three more, but when my son, who is now in his early 30s, when my son was 2, he had eczema so severely on the bottom of his feet that he could not walk. And so it was at that time, so many years ago, that I developed this salve. And the main ingredient in it is comfrey oil. It's an infused oil I make from the comfrey plant. And I just can't grow enough of it. I love it. And comfrey heals a wound, heals the skin so quickly that you must not put it over a wound that is infected. It will literally regenerate the skin right over the infection, which would be dangerous. So you have to use it carefully, but that's a big one on my list. And you can't stop eczema from coming. It is a systemic issue, but once it shows itself, you can sure use something that will cause it to leave your body much quicker temporarily until it comes
Does
again.
it work as well on psoriasis?
You bet. Absolutely.
Great.
Eczema, psoriasis, any of those skin issues, rashes, it's brilliant. Even if you have a cut, amazing. And that's another ingredient in that particular salve is lavender oil, because lavender, when combined with comfrey, is such a healing, have such healing properties. Comfrey for the skin regenerative, lavender for, again, for burns and cuts, wounds. It's extraordinary. So what did I say? Echinacea, comfrey, a few more we're looking for. Let's see. Nettles. Nettles is a big one. I love nettles. Nettles they're mean little suckers.
Dangerous.
They are mean, so you have to wear gloves to harvest them, really, and I mean elbow gloves. But the beauty of nettles is they are higher in calcium than any other herb. And so you make a tea, it's better than drinking a glass of milk, in my opinion. That's my opinion. But also you can cook nettles, and it's hard to imagine you eating those stinging things. But when you cook them, they no longer sting, and you can eat them just like spinach, and they're super tasty. And like I say, a very high mineral content. So I love nettles. That would be number 3. Number 4 would be lavender, for all the usual reasons that everyone loves lavender: the scent, the healing property. The essential oil, which I add to certain concoctions. I even make lavender cookies. There's so many possibilities with lavender, and it's a plant that I love it. It's a beauty. And another favorite of mine, and was very much a favorite of mine when I was in my 40s, was motherwort. Motherwort is, one of the Latin names is cardiaca. And so motherwort is known for heart issues, but it's also known for menopausal issues. And so if you are experiencing those symptoms, boy, it's a beauty. It really is. It's amazing. I used to combine motherwort, oat straw, lemon balm, and make a combination tea, which was very calming and helped to quell some of those common menopausal issues. Really just a beautiful plant.
I'm also now imagining that you have jars upon jars of dried herbs for teas. So what are your favorite teas that you like to make from your garden?
That's a great question. So with my English background, probably my favorite tea is bergamot. I love that. I live on it. I do. I live on it. And I especially love Earl Grey and lavender. That's a real favorite. But as far as really medicinal teas, oat straw is just it's definitely one of my go-tos. It tastes very herby, so you have to, some of these teas that you make, you almost have to kind of ignore some of the green flavor, and you get used to that in time, and actually over time find that quite delicious. But oat straw increases the fluids in the body. And so if you have joint issues, also menopausal issues, it addresses synovial fluid like nobody's business. And so great if you have like knee problems and things of this nature. So I love oat straw as a tea.
Does it also help with lower back pain?
I'm going to say no on
Not
that.
those joints. Okay. I was just wondering which, if the joints also apply to backs as well.
I'm gonna say no on that, but you know what I would recommend for that is get some either some sesame oil or olive oil, or even combine those two, because sesame oil is very light. It's a nice carrier, and infuse arnica and St. John's wort into that oil. You can also use hemp oil is good as well. Makes a nice carrier oil, but St. John's wort and arnica combined, great for inflammation, great for pain.
Okay. All right. And with that, I think we'll bring it to a close. I want to thank, Sandra wants to know, do you rub on what you just described, that the oil ointment that you just described? You
rub on joints or low back,
on your joints,
shoulders, anywhere you're achy. You can even rub it on your neck safely.
Oh, there you go. Okay. That's my job today. Thank you so very much, Lori. This was so informative. We have lots of thank yous from everyone, sending you much applause and much congratulations on your new book. And I hope that the freeze and the frost stay away from your elderberry bushes, and that you have a very successful herbal year. Sandra's giving you a hand clap as well, and the rest of us. So thank you so very much, Lori. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for coming and enjoying this wonderful, informative presentation on medicinal herbs. Thanks, Lori. Bye-bye.
Yeah.